Habaragani is a greeting in Swahili that means, what's the word? And the word on the third day of Kwanzaa is Ujima. Ujima means collective work and responsibility to maintain and build our communities together and to make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems. Our presenter is Joyce Johnson, the co-director of the Beloved Community Center here in Greensboro. In 2001, Joyce Johnson, along with her husband, Reverend Nelson Johnson, joined with Greensboro Justice Fund and other Greensboro residents to establish the Truth and Community Reconciliation Project modeled after the South African process. She has continued to establish coalitions and serve on boards to address the concerns of police brutality, voting rights, and health equity. The Johnsons continue to play a leading role in community problem solving. Joyce Johnson has spent a lifetime living and embodying the principle of Ujima. The International Civil Rights Center and Museum is proud to present Joyce Johnson speaking on the principle of Ujima.
Habari gani? I'm Joyce Hobson Johnson, one of the co-executive directors at the Beloved Community Center of Greensboro. And welcome to a discussion of Ujima, collective work and responsibility. You know, as I reflect back on my life, which by the time you see this, Lord willing, I will be 75 years old. But when I think about my life, it has really been a collective work. The fact that I'm even alive today to speak with you is a result of a community on East 15th Street, right in the shadow of First Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, where I was born on a cold winter night, December 7th, 1946, 2 months early. The story that I heard was that the pot stove, burning wood and coal, I guess, was my incubator. But I was surrounded by the warm love of a wonderful mother who was a very young, unmarried mother, but determined to bring this child into being. And here I am. Along with her was grandmother and the entire neighborhood caring for me. So this sense of collective work and responsibility is deep within who I am. I would not be alive had it not been for the collective work of that small, Black, at that time probably called Negro or colored community in Richmond, Virginia, South Richmond, Virginia. I need to be clear on that. But this whole concept of collective responsibility, collective work and responsibility is so very important in our community and really beyond. Because in the world today, we are constantly bombarded with this sense of individual achievement. And there's nothing wrong with individual excellence. We all love to cheer on North Carolina A&T Aggies when they win, and the Dudley Panthers and others. That's fine. But individual greatness should never be seen as superseding the community accomplishments, because individual excellence leads to community greatness. It should never be separated. But again, in the society that we find ourselves in today, that is very strong. Even as we battle this new demon among us called COVID-19, we're finding that individual approaches to solving that problem could possibly lead to more and more suffering, particularly people, Black people and people of color, but the entire humanity. So, as I said, collective work, community responsibility is deep to me. Look at nature, and you look at flowers, and they're beautiful, pink and red and ruby red roses. But they're even more beautiful when they're magnified by maybe yellow roses or some other flower. I love tulips personally, don't know why, but I just do. And they come in many colors. And each color magnifies the other one. Yet there's something about the spirit of independence that is out of touch, out of balance with reality that so many of us humans carry. Fortunately, if we look back at our African roots, however, this whole sense of collective work and responsibility is deep. And I submit that we need to draw from that today more than ever. Really just go back to the old landmark, if you will, and draw from that sense of collective work and responsibility. Look at the geese who fly. And any of you who know me well know that I use this metaphor a lot. The geese are able to go for long, long distances. Part of how they're able to do that is because they take turns. For a while, geese number A leads, others flap along and they bring about the propulsion that keeps them flying. Then after a bit, that geese moves to the back. Someone else comes forward. But it's all part of the plan, really a universal plan of collectivity and possibility that we miss out on as humans so often, trying to outdo the others. Even in the place where I stand, this Civil Rights Museum that means so much to all of us. I know it meant a lot to me as I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. The work that those four who sat down initially, who became wonderful friends of mine, even that was done collectively. They talked, they debated, they supported one another as they were endeavoring to do that work. But it didn't stop there. The entire, maybe not the entire Greensboro community, but a significant slice of the Greensboro community also supported that work. Collective work, community responsibility. That's the model for that. And then as they sat down, others all around the nation and even beyond this country did similar acts of justice seeking that we are able to benefit from today. And we've definitely got to reach back to that when so much of what we fought for. I was a teenager in Richmond, Virginia, when people like John Lewis came through and trained some of us in nonviolent social action. And so it was burned into me as a young person that it was something I needed to do for the freedom of not just myself, but my community. So as I went off to college, one of the earlier Black students at Duke University in 1964, I carried that in my heart. I knew I had to work hard to personally achieve. I knew that was there, but I was doing it always for the well-being of my people. I was doing it for my mother, my father, who I don't really know my real father, but I had all this community around me that was instilled in me that I was to do the same for my community that my community did for me, collectively caring for me to make sure that a baby of only 7 months development would survive and thrive and do things for her community. While I was at Duke, yes, I was struggling to make sure that I graduated in 4 years. By the grace of God, I did. But while there, I also knew that the well-being of the non-academic employees was so important. My mom was a maid at a university in Richmond at that time, so there were no Black professors, but there were some people with a lot of wisdom. People like Mr. Oliver Harvey, who organized the non-academic employees. His wife was a maid in my dormitory. So they took me along with them to church every Sunday and instilled in me, like my parents, my family, my neighborhood, my church had back in Richmond, to do the best that I could do for the well-being of everybody else. While at Duke, I was able to meet Dr. Martin Luther King, had dinner with him. And he too asked me, what are you going to do after you finish up here with this education? And I shared with him my aspirations for getting rid of racism. I tell the funny story, but it's really true. I thought that just with a few more years of hard work, that I and others would get rid of racism. So my dream was that I would finish Duke at 21 because I'd gone at 17. I'd work a few more years against racism, get rid of all of that, then go off to medical school, and then before I was 30, I hoped to be married and then have a couple of kids. Well, as I said, I'll be 75 soon, so I'm a little behind on my schedule, but I'm still on the road like the rest of us are. But collective work is it, that collective work and that community responsibility. So I just would say to you, as we celebrate Kwanzaa, but more than celebrating, really infuse in our spirit, our being, our arms, our legs, our feet, our mouths, this principle of Ujima, collective work, responsibility. Because it doesn't take away from you personally to do your work collectively. In fact, it enhances what you might do. As I said, there's just such a misunderstanding in our society today that you've always got to be elevated over the next one. But you are better when all rise. You know, just think about that. If we're down in the dumps, which we are as a society right now, but if one comes up and is able to provide a space, something to hold on to for another, then everybody improves. And really we become more of what we call the beloved community, where the dignity, the worth, the equality, and just the enormous human potential of everyone can be realized. Then we can really work in a way that will create beauty and nurturing circumstances that we can probably hardly imagine, but is there for us if we work collectively and with responsibility. Let me just draw a few other examples from my life, because as I said, my life has been a collective work of those around me, and I've tried to share that at the beloved community and from other places. When I worked at North Carolina A&T and whatever, it's always been about the collective we, not just I. Again, not diminishing I. That is vital, but the we part is so very important. You know, we're talking about collective work, but the reality of today's world is that most of us are either never paid or underpaid for so much of the work that we do. With collective work, like we saw a few years ago in this town, where the whole community came out and supported the Kmart workers. Now, some of you may not remember Kmart because I understand there are only 6 stores left today. Walmart is the king. But those workers sought help from their community, and the community of all stripes and types said people should be paid adequately for the work that they do. When they won that strike, it was the best first contract in North Carolina, which is a right-to-work state that doesn't tend to uphold work. But when they won that strike and got together and had the signature on that contract, guess what? All of us won, because over $6 million, I think it was, immediately poured into the Greensboro community as a result of their win. So when one group is hurting and we help, all of us do better as a result of that. So that's an important example for us to learn. 2020 seems so far away now as we're reaching the end of 2021. But during that time, we were correctly concerned about getting out the vote, making sure that the voices of Black people, brown people, young people, other marginalized groups was heard. I talked with a friend, Lolita Watkins from St. James Presbyterian Church. And we agreed, we really covenanted with each other, beloved community in that church, and then with a larger community, and formed something called the Black and Brown Women's Voting Initiative. And just in a little while, we were looking at Greensboro, Guilford County, it became a statewide endeavor, because others said, we want a part of that too. And we pulled on the history of Fannie Lou Hamer and Coretta Scott King. I mean, so many people who've done work. I think about people like Miss Minnie Feaster in this town, and some of you will know that name, Ann Flowers, others who made voting possible in this city. And we had to do much of our work by way of Zoom, but we taught each other how to do it, met frequently, organized to get out the vote. Churches helped, the sororities and fraternities helped, young people helped. We all made a difference at the polls. And whether who you wanted to get elected or not came out, the voices of the people were heard, because women did like we've always done. We got together and made it happen. We fed people in the meantime. We taught the younger folk around us how you do things collectively. And they taught us how to use Zoom and get out messages electronically and all of that. So sometimes I say that people looked at Greensboro when they made all these ridiculous rules that we're now having to deal with that are repressing the vote. Because as I said, folks were fed, children were taken care of, and it was a beautiful scene of everybody working together. And it did make a difference. It made such a difference that people have taken time now to write laws that would push us back. But I'm confident that we will continue to make a way out of no way and still get our votes through some kind of way. And this repression is real, but the power, the promise of collective work and community responsibility is stronger, because it's based on love. It's based on love for self, appreciating that you were made as a particular individual, yes, but to work with all of God's people to make beautiful things happen in the community. So that's part of what we have to take with us as we move forward during this period when we have COVID, we have police killings and all that around us every time, but we also have killings of one another. And that is not understanding our history, not understanding that we really are people who have emanated from love and have made ways out of no way. So that collective telling of that story is so important as well. So another point I want to raise is that we also have examples of great educational achievements in this town. We talk about North Carolina A&T, but I don't want us to ever forget also Dudley High School, Bennett College for Women. Just great institutions that were there. The Lutheran College that's no longer operating, and now there are several private schools that are out that are teaching our children. And part of what is being taught certainly is math and science and all that, but also principles like collective work and responsibility. I know that was being taught when I was in school, and that's what made a difference for me. When I was teaching at North Carolina A&T, I would tell my students that H2O is water at Duke, but H2O is also water at North Carolina A&T. But the difference at North Carolina A&T is that you will have the opportunity to get a sense of yourself, your possibilities for leadership, and also your responsibility, that collective responsibility for leadership in your community. So what you're achieving in this classroom doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to all those who sacrificed, who prayed for, who encouraged and pushed you forward to make your life possible so that you can make the life possible and more abundant for others who come after you. But I do want to add one other example to really combat this sense of just individual achievement. Again, as I said, I embrace it. My husband, Nelson, and I really encourage our two daughters, and certainly enjoy doing it with our grandchildren now, to achieve, do the best you can. Nelson's mother would always say something, show an account of yourself, child. You know who you are, you need to do the best you can do. But that was related to being connected to a family and a community. But think about a well-functioning hospital. And not too long ago, we had a Black hospital in town. Both of my daughters were born at L. Richardson Hospital, where I always said that the doctors who attended to me were wonderful. Could not have made it without them in terms of giving birth. I had to have surgery a couple of times. But it was also people like Mr. Fuller, who I'm not sure what his title was. I think he might have been part of the housekeeping staff. But he did things like bringing in a newspaper. How you doing? Every day. The folk who cleaned the floors, the people who brought the food in to me, certainly the nurses and the technicians and all that. But a well-functioning hospital, a place for revival, for restoration, has more than doctors. Yet we tend to do what? Celebrate the doctor. And I love the doctors in this town who've served me. Dr. Blunt, who's passed on, Dr. Simpkins, still living, thank God, Dr. Kilpatrick, so many of them. But a well-oiled, a well-functioning hospital has different kinds of people doing different things. And if we didn't have all of that collective work to make a beautiful hospital, we would not be able to restore people. So our community is hurting right now. It's hurting. The world is, but I'm particularly talking about our community, our African American community. We have got to restore it. So let's build that community of collective work around it, like a well-functioning hospital, to give us what we need. First, our sense of self connected to others. Give that hope, particularly to our young people. And I say our young people, because we talk too much about those young people. Well, guess what? They're ours. If they're not my children, they're yours. So we are a village, and we have to magnify this sense of village life today. That is where our hope lies, in the collective work, in the collective responsibility for retrieving our community and making it that beautiful space, that beautiful beloved space, beloved community space, where the dignity, the worth, the equality, and the enormous potential of everybody is realized. Let's do it together. Collective work.